The collar clicked shut around her neck before I even knew she had been taken. I was 3 jumps away when my old contact from the Palace Guard, a nervous man named Colin, called me on a line that was not supposed to exist anymore. His voice was shaking so hard I almost could not understand him. "Dale," he said. "They sold her. Tonight. She is being loaded onto a Voss transport within the hour." I did not ask who. There was only one her that mattered to me. Valith, 14 years old, the girl I had guarded since she was 8, back when I still had a title and a uniform, and the right to stand at her door. I had been let go months earlier for protecting her a little too fiercely, from a man who had no business putting his hands on a child. The court called it excessive. I called it Tuesday. Now her own father had sold her like a piece of furniture to cover his war debts, and I had nothing. No badge. No ship, no army, just a name, a memory of a girl who once called me her second father in front of a room full of horrified nobles, and 11 years of very specific training that nobody had bothered to take away from me when they took my job. I did not sleep that night. I did not eat. I moved. The first man I found was a Voss cargo administrator named Ulkith, sitting in a bar on a rusted trading station 3 jumps out, bragging to his friends about the valuable new asset he had personally processed. A royal, he said, laughing, soon to be broken in and resold at triple the price. He had a data slate on his belt, the kind that held shipping manifests, routes, and security schedules. I sat 2 tables away and listened to every word. When he stood to leave, I followed him into the corridor and made sure that slate ended up in my hands instead of his. He was not hurt badly. He was, however, extremely convinced that giving up his access codes was in his best interest. The manifest told me everything. Her ship was headed to a processing depot deep in the Cathara belt, a forgotten rock that no government wanted to claim and no government would ever send help to. That was exactly why nobody official would ever come looking. So I stopped looking for anybody official. I went first to a group of smugglers called the Kasari Free Traders. They had an old grudge against the Voss cartels, who had spent years undercutting their routes and running them out of honest work. I did not ask for charity. I offered them something better, the exact security patterns of a Voss depot, courtesy of Ulketh's slate, in exchange for 1 ship and their silence. Their captain, a sharp-eyed woman named Freya, studied the data for a long moment before looking up at me. "You are not asking us to save a girl," she said slowly. "You are asking us to hurt Voss profits for a decade. Is that a problem?" She smiled for the first time since I had walked in, not even a little. Next I found the scattered communities of Ashvale exiles, families who had fled the collapsing kingdom after the war debts crushed it. People who blamed the king more than they blamed any enemy, because betrayal from your own home always cuts the deepest. I stood in a crowded refugee hall and told them their true heir, the last honest hope their people had, was sitting in a cargo hold 3 jumps away, about to disappear forever into a system designed to erase her. I did not ask them to follow me out of loyalty to a crown. I asked them to follow me because they were tired of losing. By the end of that week I had 6 ships that were never supposed to exist, crewed by people who were never supposed to work together, moving on information that was never supposed to leave that bar. It should not have worked. It worked anyway, because grief and anger, when pointed in the same direction, move faster than any official fleet ever could. We reached the Cathara belt 11 days after the collar had closed around her neck. The depot commander, a heavy-set Voss officer named Tarek, believed at first that he was dealing with a simple raid, pirates looking for an easy haul. He sent out a broadcast demanding we stand down, warning us that his defense grid could tear apart anything smaller than a cruiser. Freya answered him personally, her voice calm and almost bored. "Your defense grid runs on the same manifest schedule your own administrator sold us last week. We already know when it blinks." There was a long silence on the other end. Getting inside was not clean or simple, and I will not pretend otherwise. There were tense minutes crossing open space where any mistake would have ended everything. Security teams that had to be talked down or locked out rather than fought. And one moment where a young exile pilot named Oren nearly lost his ship trying to hold a docking clamp steady under fire. He held it. That is the only detail that matters. I found her on sub-level 4, in a holding block meant for cargo that could think and feel and remember everything being done to it. She was filthy, exhausted, and still wearing that collar. But when the door came open and she saw my face, she did not look afraid. She looked furious, which for her was always a very good sign. "Dale?" she whispered, like she did not quite trust her own eyes. "Hey kid," I said. "Sorry I took so long." I did not have proper tools to remove the collar, only a cutting torch meant for hull plating. It left a thin scar along her collarbone that never fully faded. She never once complained about it, not that day and not in all the years after. We got her out. That should have been the end of the story. And for one full night, sitting together in a cramped medical bay while a Kasari doctor checked her over, I let myself believe it was. Then she asked me a question that changed everything. What happens now? I told her the truth. Her father had sold her to balance his books. The court that had once bowed to her would now pretend she never existed, because a rescued slave is an embarrassment to men who profited from the sale. If we simply returned quietly, she would spend the rest of her life as a footnote nobody wanted to remember. So what do I do? She asked. You decide, I said. You can go home and try to forgive him, or you can go home and take back everything that was taken from you. She was 14 years old, sitting in a borrowed medical gown with a fresh scar on her collarbone, and she looked at me with the same steady focus I remembered from when she was 8 and had first decided the world was not going to push her around without a fight. Take it back, she said. I will not pretend the years that followed were simple or gentle. What came next was a long, difficult struggle to reclaim a kingdom that had been sold out from under its own people, fought not with cruelty but with patience, alliances, and an entire underground network of exiles, smugglers, and quiet informants who believed, as I did, that a girl who had survived being sold deserved a chance to rebuild something better than what had failed her. We freed 3 more processing depots before the first season ended, each rescue adding more names to a growing coalition that no official government could ignore forever. Word spread through every refugee community in the region, the sold princess who came back leading her own fleet, standing beside the human who refused to let her disappear. Her father did not survive the collapse of his own corrupt court, undone not by us but by the very nobles who had helped him sell his daughter, and then panicked when the truth became impossible to hide. Valeth did not celebrate that day. She simply stood quietly at the edge of the old throne room, looking at the empty chair her father had once sat in. I do not feel like a winner, she told me. You are not supposed to, I said. You are supposed to feel like someone who is finally safe enough to build something new. She became queen at 15, the youngest ruler her people had ever known, and the very first law she signed ended the entire practice that had let her father sell her in the first place. No more debt contracts written against a child's future. No more quiet auctions hidden behind diplomatic language. She made sure every court record from that year stayed public, so that no future ruler could ever pretend it had not happened. They wanted to build a statue of her in the palace courtyard. She asked me what I thought, and I told her the truth, that a statue was for people who wanted to be remembered instead of people who wanted to keep working. She had it torn down before the paint even dried, and used the stone instead to build a new school for children whose parents had once been sold the same way she was. People still ask me sometimes why one discharged bodyguard with no army and no authority decided the right response to a stolen child was to start an entire uprising against a kingdom. I always give them the same answer. She once called me her second father in front of an entire room of nobles who thought that was inappropriate. I never once thought it was inappropriate. I thought it was the truest thing anyone had said in that palace in years. Nobody sells my kid. Not a king, not a cartel, not a system built to profit from silence. That is not a policy or a strategy. That is simply what family means where I come from, and I carried that meaning with me across every system I had to cross to bring her home. She rules now with the same steady fire she had as a girl, and I still stand near her, not as a guard anymore, but as the man who taught her that being taken does not mean staying gone. Every year, on the day I found her, she sends me the same short message. Thank you for being late, but not too late. I always send the same reply. I will never be too late again.